the purpose of 321, there are two really clear objectives. And one is that you identify a projection, it's coming in the form of a disturbance, and that you're actually able to take back that projection. You're able to move it from the person that you have it on out there in the world, and you're able to take it back into first person and own it. So owning the projection is the first goal. The second one is that energetic shift that I talked about, because you're using your energy to keep something in place that would be better used to do something else. And so that energetic shift is the second thing. There are some other byproducts of doing the process. One is just what you're describing. You may have an insight. You may suddenly get, oh my gosh, I understand why this happened now. I understand that this is actually something that came from a message I received from my mother, or it came from an injury that I had with my first boyfriend that I'm playing out again. So an insight and the answer to why something's happening may emerge, which is great. Also, you'll find that in the process that almost inevitably you have more compassion and more empathy for the person that you're working with in the process. And sometimes a strategy for dealing with the problem or dealing with the disturbance actually comes up too. You may actually come up with a strategy for how to work with it. So those are kind of extra. You know, the insight, the compassion, and the strategies are all extra. They're all icing on the cake. But the thing that we're most interested in is owning the projection, taking it back, and also making that energetic shift so that you're freed up. It's very challenging to spot unconscious material if it's not conscious. Right? Yeah. So how do we do it? How is it that we actually are able to locate what it is that's unconscious in us or is latent in our awareness? Just look to your environment. And wherever there's a disturbance, and as I said earlier, either a positive or a negative disturbance, you can pretty well guess that has something to do with you. And as I said earlier, because there are always things that we prefer, there are always things we don't like, there are always things we could change. And there probably isn't a person in this room who, if we got working on it, we wouldn't change certain things about you. But why I'm upset about one quality in one person and not the other 48 that are manifesting simultaneously. So that's the best place to look for it. So when we do the exercise, as a way of starting, we're going to start with looking at a person. And you don't have to understand necessarily why you're upset. Basically, you're just going to look at that person, you're going to describe them, and you're going to talk about why that person is upsetting to you. Keeping in mind it can be positive or it can be negative. And we're going to write about that in third person. That's going to be our first step. And we're going to start as far out as possible. And we're basically going to describe the story or the narrative, and just using your 5 sense perceptions, talk about why this person's upsetting. And you basically have 8 minutes to describe the person who disturbs you, either in a positive or a negative way, and just talk about what exactly it is that's bothering you, using your 5 senses. Okay? And make sure that you use the pronoun he, she, it, or they. Okay? Little story. You're just writing a little story. You have about 8 minutes. Okay, so are we ready to move on? Okay, so what's happening now? We've just written about it in third person. What are we going to do next? We're going to move into a dialogue. We're going to move into second person and have an exchange with the object, or the object of our distress, and talk to them as though we have something we need to say to each other. Okay? Now, it's important to note that this is an important energetic shift, because the willingness to actually bring the issue into second person, to sit down in your own awareness and to have this conversation, that you've already shifted your energetic barrier. Okay? That something has already happened energetically that's important. The main thing is, don't get too concerned about would they say this, would they not say this. That's the thing that comes in, and just go with whatever comes up. All right, what's important is that you let whatever it is that they want to say in this exercise emerge, and don't, just go with that, because you'll be surprised what comes up. Okay? So now I'm going to ask you to write in the second person, keeping in mind that you're making the shift into relationship, and that's a big step. And finally, I'm going to ask you to write in the first person, to take that other person's perspective and write as though you were them. So we're going to make our last move. So we're moving right into first person. So basically you are going to write 1 or 2 paragraphs from that person's perspective, and if they talk about you, they're going to be referring to you in third person. We've taken the disturbance that has occurred in the third person, spent some time describing it, then we moved it into second person, we've had a conversation with the person about that, and now we've moved it into first person, where we are them and we're occupying their mind and whatever that disturbance is. But we talk about how the kind of immediate compassion or empathy that you might feel for someone's position, that's a first opening, but it's not until you really get it that it's you does it become real compassion. Because it's only when you've really felt it and identified with it that you can actually hold the whole thing in big mind, big heart. Otherwise it actually borders on, could be just a little bit patronizing. Once you've made that shift and you really feel it like, oh, that's me, that's actually not them, then real compassion arises at that moment. Okay? Let's just look at how, those of you who are able to see it, how you saw the projection, what is it, and how you're taking it back. Because that's the question you have to ask at the end of the process, is what is it exactly that I've been putting on them that's really mine? So basically you've just gone through a process where you have experienced phenomena of your mind and related to it in third person. We moved it into second, we've moved it into first, and now what I'd like you to do, if you wouldn't mind for just a moment, is just close your eyes. And I'd like to ask you to just connect to big mind, big heart. And in that ever-present awareness, to hold the entire process of today and the entire situation that you've been working on. In that enormous expanse of space and compassion that is your own mind. And I'd like you to just appreciate the generosity and the conviction of your spiritual work. Just for the willingness to be able to take what can be a difficult and challenging thing and bring it fully into your awareness and interact with it and free it. And in liberating that, you're liberating yourself and all sentient beings. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your work.